Hi there, everyone. This is Sharon, the host of Self Care You podcast. And so, with Self Care You podcast, it is the intersection of self care, advocacy, and compassion for self caregivers. And so, for this episode, we have another wonderful guest. We have Gregoria Lewis, and he is just doing some wonderful, wonderful things in the community for himself and for others. And just know that there is a way out. And so we're bringing on Gregorio.
Hi, Sharon. Good morning or
Hi
good
there
afternoon.
again. Yeah, and again, it is such an honor to have you on because pretty much what this podcast represents is like if there was a person, you are the person.
Thank you. Well, that's in part why I wore my pink shirt to match your background and your color scheme. So thank you for making it perfect for me as well.
Yes, yes, yes. And so tell us a little bit about yourself, because you definitely have a story, and it's kind of one of those things. It's the unfortunate things that has occurred in your life, but out of that, you have made a magnificent part of your life as well. So, just in general, tell us about yourself first.
Thank you so much. I'll be 49 this month of May. I live here in the south of Mexico in a mountain range. I moved here for my safety. That's the fact. Uh, I worked for many years as what we call a certified peer specialist, a mental health worker who has been trained to use their personal lived experience to connect with and support and benefit others at their choosing. And for part of that period of time while I was working and for my life, 28 years prior, I was a victimized child turned adolescent turned adult. And I was victimized by the mental health system. I was not loved by my parents. My parents are sick. Uh, I was forced to live a life as a sick person. I was given a diagnosis of schizophrenia, which then was turned into bipolar disorder. In fact, I was given a long list of diagnoses, all of which have been removed and debunked for that matter. Um, but I'm not the kind of person who will keep his mouth shut when someone tries to say that I was misdiagnosed, because that would not be true. I was not misdiagnosed. I was intentionally given a fraudulent and false diagnosis to shut me up. As a child, I knew something was wrong in my family, but they were wealthy and powerful. And so they did what they had to do to shut their kid up. That's what they did. And that's how I got diagnosed with schizophrenia, which was false. And ultimately, in 2015, I had those diagnoses removed because we obtained the documentation from the Massachusetts Department of Mental Health from when I was a teenager. Because at that point in time, when I received those documents in 2013, I was employed by the Massachusetts Department of Mental Health as a trainer of staff members, psychiatrists, social workers, mental health counselors, and peer workers. And so I was able to obtain my documents. And as it turned out, when I was a ward of the Massachusetts Department of Mental Health, and then 28 years later, I was working for them. It was proven by their own documentation, that in their own handwriting, before the internet, of course, that they knew in 1988 that I did not have schizophrenia, and every possible bad thing, or many of the most terrible things that could be done to a person, were done to me over the course of those 3 years of being in their care. Well, they knew the whole time I was being abused. And then the 25 years after, and ultimately getting my documents proved that the diagnoses were a fraud, and the 80,000 pills or so that I swallowed were nothing but poisonous and harmful for me. And so the way it went was when I proved that I was, in fact, victimized by the system that was responsible for victimizing me as a child, then victimized me again. And so I lost my job, obviously, and I lost everything, in fact. And so within 3 years, I was homeless. No one would work with me. I was blacklisted. My business was ruined. I was smeared personally, professionally, and in every possible way. My finances were destroyed. And so I left the country. I left everything behind. I flew to Europe. I began a new life with nothing. And over the course of a year, I traveled all over the European continent. I gave approximately 100 trauma recovery presentations and workshops throughout that period of time in 27 or so different countries. And in 12 of those countries, I gave professional workshops training people in the curriculum that I had created, despite the fact I was blacklisted back home. And I did it all while I was homeless and squatting and sleeping in like anywhere I could, and sometimes in fancy hotels, depending on who hired me. And ultimately, in May of 2019, which is just my 4 year anniversary of living here in Mexico, I moved here in May of 2019, and I've more or less been living here ever since. That's in a nutshell what happened. And I guess if I was going to say if I was okay, the answer would be no. The answer is no, I'm not okay. I struggle every day, and I don't have my needs met. And life is very hard. And it's a miracle that throughout all of that, I was able to publish books that people found valuable. And despite all the people who don't want me to talk and don't want me to be successful, because I represent something that is the antithesis of the promoted mental health paradigm of how you're supposed to be well, I just define every part of that, and I'm well. I'm not okay, but I'm well. So that's the funny thing, that I continue to survive and build a better life thanks to the many people who believe in justice, truth, human rights, respecting human dignity, being honorable, and doing the right thing for your fellow person, regardless of anything. If they are worthy of it because they were born and they try their best to be the best they can be, even starting at any moment, then they're worthy of my support, my kindness, and my non possessive love. And I only ask that people treat me with the same because I am just as worthy. And I thank you for allowing me to share all of that. I'm not sure what you were expecting me to say for this first segment, but that is my answer. Thank you.
I really appreciate you sharing all of that. I know that some aspects of it, was very difficult in sharing, but you definitely shed light of a certain part of the mental health system that some people are not aware of, and then two, even if certain individuals who have some authority level are aware of, may ignore, and it's sometimes just unfortunately people just being in denial. I myself have worked in the mental health system. I would say that I never witnessed, like say overt abuse or anything overt, because if I would have, I'd definitely be the first one to report it. But what I can say, I have seen, I guess you could say, more of the covert um, things, more so kind of like if somebody reports something, they're not believed, especially if there's a diagnosis. And that's something I kind of just want to talk about just a little bit, because you were a child. And for those of you who are listening to this, and I know some people are experiencing it just in general, whether they're a child or adult, they get a diagnosis and then they may not agree with it. And because, like in the mental health, I can remember like being in school, like when it came to teachers and when it came to the mental health system, it's like there is truly power in the power of the pen, meaning what we write down, what is documented, how we document something. And so, in saying that, I want the listeners, and especially like if you are a teacher, if you're a mental health professional, and even other parents or anyone, to really listen what is being said on this episode, because it is, you know, whatever you want to call it, the dark side, but it's the reality of what can happen sometimes in the mental health systems. There are some things that happens, I kind of call it by default, because the system can't accommodate everybody. But when it comes to outright abuse, I say this because, like, you were a child, and like, what is a child to do? They're reporting something, but then you have parents, who, like you say, have money, have power, and then, you know, the system doesn't want to go against that, especially if they're supporting something or just have pull, and that's unfortunate. But my whole point of saying all of that is people need to be listened to, and something needs to be done, because sometimes it's not safe, and those diagnoses can follow people. One thing I have seen is with certain diagnoses, especially with schizophrenia, bipolar, and borderline personality, especially those three, when those get on top of someone, most of the time people are not heard, even though what they're saying is, it's not even their truth, it's the truth.
So you can appreciate how difficult it is for the system and the people with the quote unquote authority to have to deal with me, knowing that the truth that I speak is my blood on their hands, and nobody can shut me up. I mean, let's be real. I received death threats, Sharon. I've
Wow.
received, oh, yes, and I've had all sorts of terrible things happen. And I've had my business smeared. I used the word decapitated. I'm still alive, but I'm a murder survivor. Let's not, no one needs to mince words about me. I know exactly what happened to me. Thanks to the people who documented it. And that puts me in a very unique situation, and that no one's going to contest this story. But also, it's very difficult to find anybody who listened to me to support the result of all of this. First of all, unethical. Second of all, illegal. Third of all, federally illegal. The list goes on. Like the fraud, every part of it. No one can silence me anymore. But what they can do is they can make it very difficult for me to live. And so you know me because I'm very public on the platforms that haven't blocked me yet for telling the truth. There's many mental health media platforms in the States, and many people who are well respected and influential who despise me. And they've made my life very difficult. And they promote a paradigm of wellness, an ideal of mental health, and the whole checklist of things with an asterisk. Asterisk? And the asterisk is for people like me. So it's very easy for, excuse me for saying this, but it's true. It's very easy for a well educated white person from a wealthy, privileged background to get into a position that they haven't earned. Let's just be fair, of authority in the mental health realm. And maybe they have the education and they did whatever they had to do to get that job, but they don't actually know that it's not a business that they're working in. they're dealing with people's lives.
Oh, yes.
And when you realize that your job is not to help people, it's to keep the cost as low as possible and keep people who could maybe cause a bad thing to happen in society, under wraps, then you're not concerned about doing the right thing. You need to make sure that you can continue to pay your house payment, your mortgage, and your car payments, and your for your vacation plans, and that does not bode well for people who are like me, and does not bode well for people who do not have advocacy, and it does not result in good things for people who are poor, or from marginalized backgrounds, or who are vulnerable, or who are um, systematic recipients of racism, or other forms of oppression that we all know is right out in the open. And for most of the time we've all lived, and maybe you're around my age or so, we've had to face this right in front of us, and we see it. But we see it perhaps because we know about it, because we might experience it. I'm saying, me personally, I experienced it because of what happened to me. Other people who have been marginalized in society, they maybe didn't have this same thing happen to me, but their whole life was the same, where they were marginalized and oppressed from birth to how they were born. And so the system isn't designed uh, to help people like us. And so when I say us, I identify myself publicly with the marginalized, vulnerable communities of this world. So I am not well liked or well loved or wanted by the majority. But that's because most people don't know my story, and they don't know that I'm a beautiful person, and they don't know that I am kind. They don't know that I am loving, and they don't know that I chose to take everything that happened to me and turn it into something good. And so, shame on people who are in positions of authority. Shame on media officials who choose to ignore the reality. Shame on anybody who can stand up and say, "I stand up for the people. I am for the marginalized. I am a mental health advocate." Bah, 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 with the asterisk. And we don't need that asterisk anymore. I'm just as valid, just as legitimate, just as valuable as any other human being. And anybody who seeks to counter that with deception, with judgment, with like reverse stigma, because he's better now. Like, come on, give me a break. Be kind, be loving to all people, and listen to people and take them seriously. And then you don't have these problems. All it takes is believing somebody when they tell you something. And if you have any questions about what they're saying, find out, because you can get the answers to your questions. All you have to do is ask. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And pretty much like everything you just shared, it kind of reminded me of kind of two things come up. One is when I used to work in Department of Social Services, Child Protective Services. What I had seen was that, let's say a child, there's allegations against a parent, and then with those allegations, the child goes into foster care. And then when the child is in foster care, let's say the child make allegations against the foster parent. And what I saw was that when the child made, of course, it's not each and every case, but sometimes when a child have made allegations against the foster parent, and then that child is labeled as being difficult and being, I just say it's being labeled. And then I'm like, well, wait a minute, or they're lying and they're manipulative. And it's like, okay, so you're labeling this child as this person, but you believe them when they said it happened to from their parent, but you're not believing them when they said it happened with the foster child. And we know that, like, when it comes to foster children, unfortunately they're abused and neglected and abandoned just as much in foster care as they are with their um, biological parents or their guardian. Pretty much what I'm saying is that we need to at least investigate what that person is saying. Why are they being labeled or being viewed as difficult, even if it's the same? Because the way I looked at it, it's like, okay, so if we're not going to believe them regarding the foster parent, why should we believe them regarding their parent? You know? And that's not always the case. The other part of that, in that when it comes to individuals who's considered to be of authority, meaning like a therapist or their supervisor or someone over the mental health system, because they have that sense of authority, they are believed more, unfortunately, you know? And what I've seen is that individuals who's considered a patient or a client are not always believed. And then or something gets right off. And that is unfortunate. And I'm pretty much just saying this out loud just so that, because my part of the podcast is the advocacy. And sometimes we're thinking that we're just advocating for treatment, but some and services, but sometimes we're advocating for people's rights. We're advocating for people to be heard, and we're advocating for people to be treated in a dignified way, you know? So it's important for everyone. And to be honest, especially when I worked in the emergency room, let's say if someone came in emergency services, oh, I can't remember the name that it's called, on papers, on emergency papers, and we hear from both sides, and sometimes we can't even tell what the truth is, you know and so in saying that, it's unfortunate that the person who came into the emergency room, that they end up having to stay at least overnight, because sometimes there is an observation. But my whole point is saying that sometimes I just say the truth is somewhere in the middle. And I think these type of conversations are really needed, because as helpful that the mental health system can be, but we have to acknowledge that other side of it. And we just need to be able to hear people out. So I really appreciate you being here, telling your story of what happened, because it needs to be heard.
Thank you very much for the validation you just gave to people like me. We need to hear that. And I can tell you that I'm from the state of Massachusetts. And I know that Massachusetts has a great reputation as being a liberal state, and we're the leaders in all these things. So let me tell you guys something. It's a fraud. The whole system in the state is, yes, it appears to be liberal and all this nice stuff, but it's for privileged people only. So if you're not one of them, no matter what you look like on the outside, because we have a diverse state, if you're not one of the people with privilege, you don't matter. And I know that personally. And so what Sharon is saying is very true. It's not difficult to ask questions and get answers. And if somebody is repeatedly making a statement, I'm speaking both as a child victim, as an adult victim, and as a lifelong advocate who has no faith in the system where it comes from and the people involved, for good reason. So if a person is saying something repeatedly and they're saying they're not being believed, and they keep saying it and they keep saying it, maybe they're not, as they called me back home, crazy. Maybe they're telling the truth. And like you said earlier, Sharon, when they write that word or those sentences in your file, that follows you forever. And it's like an automatic invalidation of anything you say. Well, let me be clear. I'm telling the truth. And I say it publicly with confidence. And you should listen to people. If your job is part of the helping profession, If you work in mental health as a provider of any sort, if you're a teacher, if you're a nurse, if you're a doctor, a community member of any sort, an advocate for people in general, anyone, take seriously when someone tells you that they're being abused. Take seriously when someone tells you that someone's hurting them. And take them seriously, even if they say the person hurting them is famous or powerful or influential or has lots of money or is your boss. Because if you don't take that person seriously, and then you find out that you just let that person be abused, that's on you. And if you're a spiritual person, if you believe in some sort of higher power of any sort, or if you have children yourself, or if you have a partner that you look in the eyes at night when you go to bed to say, I love you, know that you screwed up. And there's hundreds of people who I hope can look at me in the eye right now and see me smile because I'm letting you know you made a mistake. And you might never want to fix it because you have too much ego, or you are don't want to pay the consequences for your errors, or you don't want to get in trouble. But know that you might get away with the harm you've caused. But before you pass on to the next realm, you will have to face what you've done, and that is in part what helps me get through the day. And so, if you work and don't do harm to protect someone else, even if it means that you have to deal with a whole bunch of stuff yourself, because once you do that harm, you can't go back from it. And so that's why I live in Mexico now, and that's why I speak publicly about the abuse that I survived and who was responsible for it, and I do it fearlessly. And I've already suffered the consequences for doing that. You're not supposed to speak out against people in power. So look at my smile. I know that I was devastated in life. I know that my business was ruined, and I know that I struggle every day. And maybe I'll die today just from a broken heart and from this long period of not having my needs met, a long period of not having health care. Yeah, I'm like I said at the beginning, I'm well, but I'm not okay. And I'm well because I know how to heal. I'm well because I know what to do to help myself. But I'm not okay for a reason. And it's not something that I can fix. It's when people do bad things to you and then you're just left to rot and you don't have the support that you need because someone like myself with parents like mine who grew up like me, you don't have that family background, you don't have that university friends community, you don't have any of that, and I have none of it. So I did all of this myself. So because I did everything myself, because I had to, I can smile and I can tell this truth and I can say whatever I need to say because I know that as long as I tell the truth publicly, that I'm safe. Or I can say I'm safe enough because no one can dispute it. And that does give me power. And although I know people who are not watching this video, but I can like motion that I'm choking myself with this right now because I am choked out by so many people with power and authority in the United States who either they know the story and they're terrified of it, or they truly are delusional and want to believe that everything's okay and that I'm crazy. Just know that this smile that I am flashing to all of you right now across the internet to Sharon is because I survived and I learned to be okay, even though I'm not okay. And so, what can I say? I have to keep going. And if today is my last, so what? I've done a lot of good, and my legacy will be good in the minds and the hearts of those who care about human rights, dignity, and fighting the good fight. And so, once again, I thank you, Sharon, for allowing me to share from my heart.
But definitely, thank you. I appreciate all of that. And the thing that I do want to add is that you made a really good point. If someone keeps saying something about them being, especially being abused, definitely investigate even more, even if what someone doesn't see on the outside may not be so. Because one thing that, we've discovered, unfortunately, sometimes it may be years later, is what that person is saying is the truth. And I can say that by working in different areas of mental health, especially in assessment, you just see so much and you hear so much. And sometimes, I hate to use this word, something may seem bizarre, but sometimes it's those bizarre things which are really the truth. And I think there's something with our brain. It's like, oh, there's no way that this person can do this. There's no way that this incident can happen. But there's just some things that I just say we may not never understand. And what I have seen is that when someone is adamant about something, about continuing to tell their story, and if you really listen and hear, their story do not change. It's been consistent. If there's a consistent story, that person needs to be heard because they're screaming at the top of their lungs, literally, and everything else. And like I said, I've seen it, at least, like it may not have been my case, but I'm like, oh, well, what's going on there? So basically what I'm saying is people need to be heard. The other thing I just want to say too, just in general, there's a lot of good people in mental health who's doing it from their heart, and he's wants the best for everybody. And the unfortunate thing is there are some, for whatever reason, you know, like with your situation, sometimes people may know certain things, may not always speak up, or when it comes to an organization, may not advocate on behalf of the patient. And when it comes to the advocacy part of it, we have to acknowledge these things. We may not agree with it, and the only thing I can tell anyone who's listening to this, do your research. I mean, when it comes to anything, so do your research and you can make your own decision. But it's really important for everyone to have a voice. And so, what I want to do is, I want to talk a little bit more about how you've been able to work through all of these things and create the things that you have. So, we're going to take a commercial break right now. And then when we come back, we will cover those things. Hey everyone, my name is Sharon D. Brown, and I am with Self Care U Academy. Anyone who knows me knows that I am passionate about self care. And so, with my personal experience, with my professional experience, I have developed some awesome workshops and developed Bridging the Gap. And what Bridging the Gap really is about addressing the needs and addressing the gaps within the mental health system. And one thing that I do want to say is whatever gaps that are there, it's not intentional. No system is sustainable in helping every single person. So where that gaps fall, Self Care U is here to pretty much address that.
Ready to take your grooming to the next level? Our bald head shave, beard wash, and head massage package is the ultimate experience. Our skilled barbers will give you a fresh new look and a relaxing head massage that will leave you feeling revitalized, refreshed, and sharp. Don't settle for less. Book your appointment today and experience the ultimate grooming experience. Get groomed.
So thank you, thank you, thank you. And so again, thank you so much for sharing everything that you have shared thus far. Now, what I want to hear more about, because this is the other part of this Self Care You podcast, is pretty much how people can become self care givers. And you have definitely demonstrated that. You've written, I know, 2 books. Have you written more than 2?
I have.
Yeah. And
Ta-da!
And I appreciate you sending me samples of them, and I've had the opportunity to review, and they really, really, especially the workbook. Oh my, that is something that people need, and it kind of like again, this one of the purpose of Self Care You podcast, because one thing that I have seen is that we don't talk about and really truly teach people about being well. And your workbook definitely tackles that.
Exacto. This is exactly what I'm about. And to preface this, can you imagine how absolutely frustrating it is to truly want to be helping people by working with people in such a way, sharing of my wisdom, sharing of my creations that I know are effective. These books have sold over 10,000 copies. They're in 8 different languages. I know a little bit about recovery and healing. And you know how frustrating it is to not be able to do what I'm good at because bunch of people don't want me to talk because I told the truth about healing and recovery from the things that happened to me. I mean, give me a break, mental health system. Listen to Sharon. We need to be helping people learn how to help themselves, keeping the revolving door of patients who have to fight for every little thing that all human beings as a birthright are worthy of. And at some point in their life, they got hurt and then they lost it, and we never helped them get to where they need to be self sufficient. I am one of tens of millions of people in the United States who had themselves knocked down by no fault of their own. And instead of being helped up appropriately and imparted skills with which that they could transform their lives, take control of the things that are getting them in trouble, processing the hurts inside, transforming the pain and the hurt and the abuse and the loss and the trauma into something that they can build a life with, a stable, happy life with. I've had my tongue cut out. So thank you once again, Sharon, for this amazing opportunity to share about what matters. And what matters is that people can help themselves get better. And our job as advocates and mental health workers and so on is to help them do that. Or I'd like to think that's our job.
And so how can, when I say we people, because one of the message that I am trying to get across to people is that even if you go to therapy, even if you are on medication, my thing is you got to do self care before, during, and after. And I'm really a bit advocate about, because even with myself, I had, a good life, and, also, yeah, a couple of things. But when it comes to those childhood experiences, let's say for instance, like I'm a single parent child, meaning grew up with my mother. I didn't realize till just a few years ago the impact of not having a father in my life. And then it's not just relational, but also just in different aspects. And so it's kind of like, oh my gosh, I really do really need to go deep, deep. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, how did that impact me with the decisions that I make, just in general? I mean, not just in men, but even at work, how I relate to other people. And so that's another reason why I'm such a big advocate. And so again, part of the kind of question or discussion is like, how can we get that message to everyday people, to people in authority, people in the mental health field? We all, because none of us are exempt. It doesn't matter who we are, that we've got to do the work. We got to look at ourselves. And your workbook does a really good job of that because it asks specific questions And I was just reading part of it where you were able to acknowledge of having certain let's just say experiences or thoughts, but you're like, but you have them in check. You know what I'm saying? And you can ask yourself certain questions to say, okay, yeah, I may, exaggerate. When I say exaggerate, just meaning like just be so in tune with something, but you can come back and say, okay, so what am I thinking here? What is this? And things like that. And I don't think people get it.
Yeah, you're right. Most people, I think maybe, don't know that they actually have the power within themselves to keep
Hmm.
things together. And we've been taught in our society that we need other people to tell us. And this has been going on for a long time. But the truth is, the answers are within us. And I believe that we should be helping people find those answers within themselves by helping them ask the questions that are necessary to get to the bottom of what's causing them the distress that's getting them in trouble. And I really think that is something we've neglected for a long time. And I can appreciate why the system doesn't really want someone like me to be out here saying, hey, we can actually get people to help themselves heal. And, you know, it's a problem for a system that's ostensibly on paper intended to help people heal. But you can't have that system without those people. And not just the catch 22. It's, I don't know how to describe it, but when you're playing with people's lives, it's not just the catch 22, the one person experiences. It's the collective catch 22. I guess is the best way to say it. We should be
Yeah.
helping people not be stuck in a system, in a circle that doesn't let them get better. And I want to see people get better.
Yeah. And with some of that too, um, I want to say, at least what I can see, not all of it, but some of it is just a system issue, just because it's part of a system. And there's certain things that, like, not one person and one agency, even if you change a policy or something, it take years, to be honest, to change that. The other thing I want to add to that, like, now I'm, like, in my own business. And so one of the things that I did is to make sure that I started looking at things from a business perspective. And so in saying that, they're like, oh, you got a niche, you got a niche. And so let's say the mental health system is huge. At the end of the day, you cannot help every single person. So the system needs to acknowledge that. So, and that's another reason why I started my business, because it's the gap. I have a program called Bridging the Gap. It's like, well, what about those individuals who go to the emergency room? Some of them don't even need to go to the emergency room and shouldn't go to the emergency room, or who do go and do not need to be admitted. And I understand they're overwhelmed, but there's a difference of being overwhelmed and being in a crisis, even though the body doesn't know the difference. However, but it's like, the whole message is teaching people to be well. And the other part of that too is the repetition, meaning we have to continue to tell people what you really just said, is that people really do have the ability to do that. And I think that people like you, people like me, and like other people who are, teaching people how to be well, just the more that they hear it from different sources, then eventually, but it'll be helpful. And the system is changing a little bit. We have more people, let's say, who's integrating yoga and meditation and mindfulness and wellness, but it's still not enough when it comes to that. But people, you really do, because at the end of the day, even when you go and someone can guide you, you still got to go back and do the work. I don't think people realize the work that really has to be done, whether you go to therapy or not. Just like I didn't know the work that I needed, I mean, none of us are exempt.
Thank you. The first thing I'd like to say is that everybody is screwed up in some way. That's a fact. Secondly, I've gotten a lot better at not letting people know publicly how much I'm hurting, which is either a good thing or not. Uh, but if I tell people how bad it is sometimes with me, even now, they don't want to deal with me. And I just have things get worse. Uh, Thirdly, the truth is, everyone, like you just said, and like I'm saying as well, almost everyone has the power within themselves to help themselves. And I think we should be giving people the tools that they may need or want to do that. Fourthly, I escaped this section by running out of the hospital with my Department of Mental Health employee badge. So I know that hospitals don't always know what to do, and I didn't escape another section. All of this was retaliatory after I came out with my story. But with the 7 days and the assistance of a lawyer and a district judge who looked at my admission papers and said all of the boxes that you have to check to have a legitimate admission were fraudulent, and they got me out of there without ever giving me a pill or a drug, even though they charged my insurance company for it. And so, yeah, a lot of people don't know. Well, I should say it this way. It seems that a lot of people who work in mental health don't know the difference between a healthy person and a person who's in crisis, because uh, if they did, um, I wouldn't have to had escaped a place, and I would not have had to have been incarcerated somewhere for 7 days, just to have a judge say this whole thing's an illegal admission. There's nothing wrong here. Let this kid go home. So twice, right? So I know a little bit about it. Yeah, a little bit. We should be
Yeah,
better.
yeah, yeah. And again, that is unfortunate. And this podcast is all about advocacy, meaning to and hearing all sides of it. And that's just like in being well, being well, when it comes to wellness, sometimes for one individual, therapy and medication may do extremely well. That may be all that they need. But then for others, and I would say for most of the time, for the majority of others, we need other things. They call it complementary, treatment and services, alternative treatment. But these things, to be honest, the alternative things, complementary things that they have identified as that has really been around thousands of years before the what they call traditional. But my whole point is saying that it's important for people to hear really everything, as much as possible, so they can have discernment, when it comes to the mental health system and when it comes to getting well. And if it's okay, I like to read a couple of um, is in your workbook, is doing what's right. And you had a couple of questions, and I thought that, oh man, these are really good questions, and I really do want individuals to get your book. You wrote a passage, when you were talking about that you have extreme feelings. And that's what I was trying to say, when I was saying
Let me read the
before.
passage.
You have used the word exaggerated, but you have extreme feelings. But then part of the workshop, and is it okay for me to share the couple of the questions that you had in the workbook?
Would you allow me to read the passage and then we can do the questions? Because that way people can really
Yes,
get a feel for it.
please.
All right.
Yes.
So this passage is from page 6 from the original Peer Support Recovery and Coping Skills Workbook and Curriculum. And I know that's a mouthful, and it's 100% intentional. So thumbs up to me. um, and so this passage is called Doing What's Right. You can see this is how it looks. Okay. I am a person who sometimes experiences extreme feelings. These feelings cause me to feel excellent and sometimes not so good. I struggle with knowing what to do with my feelings when they feel so strong. Sometimes I react to things I experience in exaggerated ways. Often, when I am feeling intense emotions, this happens. I must never forget that I'm a human being. My life will continue moving forward, even if I overreact at times. And we can learn from this and find some peace in our lives.
Thank you for that.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
when I read that, I thought that that was so, and it's such an insightful awareness. And then the other piece of that is it wasn't just the awareness, but again, when it comes to the questions that you have in the workbook, it's a great way to be able to reflect. And again, it's kind of like when it comes to self-care, like I have 4 pillars of self-care, which is self-awareness, sitting in silence, deep rest, and movement and action. And this is a great piece of the self-awareness piece of it. And I guess you could say to sit in the silence is sitting down to be self-aware to do the work to do the work sheet. And so, did you want to read the questions that you have along with that?
I do. I do. Um, List three situations in your life that cause you to experience strong emotions. Okay, first of all, for everyone out there, there's no right or wrong way to do this. These questions can be answered in any way that you want, and every answer that you give is correct. Tomorrow, you might give a different answer. Next week, you might say something different. And sometimes you might not have anything to say because it might sound like an impossible question to answer. It's all good. What matters is that you think about it. Not that you have an answer today or that you do something today, but that you start thinking about maybe I can do something about what's going on, and I don't have to just stay stuck in a cycle or a circle of things that make me unhappy. You can do something about it. And this book and this guy is about helping other people do that. So thank you, Sharon, for this opportunity to answer the questions that I wrote based on my own experience of trying to heal, because that's solid gold. List three situations in your life that cause you to experience strong emotions. When I have a money challenge, which the truth is it happens a lot because, as I stated earlier, I lost everything, my career, all my stuff, moved to a new country with nothing. When I have money problems, or I don't want to call it problems, situations, I start to think in a very extreme way. I would not even use my own words here in the question. It's strong emotions. I would say not even strong thoughts, like extreme stuff. Money. Uh, when I am in a situation where there's violence or like threats or bullying or something that I know is oppressive against the person or myself, a vulnerable person, an animal, a vulnerable animal, a child, a woman, a person, LGBTQ person, a person of color, racist, sexist, violence, horrible, whatever, human against human or human against vulnerable animal situation. I just can't even think straight. I have to act. It's too much. Um, and a third situation, well, let's just say I love somebody very much, and sometimes I have a hard time coping with when things aren't easy. I'll just say that. So those are three situations amongst many that cause me to experience strong emotions.
Yeah,
Questions?
thank you for
Oh,
sharing that.
pardon me.
No, I was just saying thank you very much for sharing that.
Thank you. Shall I? Thank you. Shall I answer question two?
Yes, please.
Give one example where you did something positive for yourself, even though it was hard to do. Oh my goodness. Just because I wrote this book doesn't mean it's easy for me to do. That's kind of that's a good thing, I think, for people to know. One example of when I did where I did something positive for yourself, even though it was hard to do. Um, okay, with full respect, it's hard for me to do interviews like this, but I was ready. I made sure my headphones were working and everything was good to go, and I had my books here and I had my water. And so this is a very positive experience today. You're wonderful. This is a great opportunity for me to share from my heart. And so even though it's hard for me to kind of schedule and like make things happen because it's hard for me, it is. Here we go, and we're doing great. So thumbs up to both of us. Uh, list three experiences that make me feel happy. I adopted some cats here in Mexico, and like I like it when it's really quiet, and I can like put out a bowl of food for them or a bowl of water, and I like to listen to them like crunching on the food or like slurping the water, and I think to myself, oh, I love my life right now. This four-legged creature who cannot talk to me in a language that like we share, like a verbal language, just comes to my house and lets me give them food and water, and they like it, and they fill their belly, and they get hydrated, and maybe they'll sleep in my bed and cuddle with me. I'm like this four-legged creature that just runs around, chooses to do that with me. That makes me happy. Um, uh, I like I don't speak Spanish very well, even though I lived here. So I lived in like a small town, an isolated town for a long time. So I'm a foreigner. I look different than people. But because I'm here every day and I do the same thing, I just hang out, I walk around, I meet people, I see the people on the street selling stuff and everything, and the children and the old ladies, and at the restaurants and cafes. Like every day, I have a nice moment where like, good morning, good afternoon, like how are you? The kids know me by name, they're yelling at me, and the dogs come up to me. That's beautiful. Like we don't have to speak the same language, we don't have to look the same, nothing. We can just have connection, and I just love that. Third, mm, there's just someone in my life that I like being nice to, and they've had it really rough in life. And uh, I learned recently that there's something I do that makes them feel really good. It's by just giving them little cute little gifts that I get, like I find a shell at the beach, or I take a photo of something, or I give them a sticker. I'm like, oh, the littlest things can bring about like feelings of happiness and security and love, and that's just a beautiful thing for me. I love that. I love doing that.
Well, again, thank you for sharing all of that. And one of the things that I would like to say, with the audience is, for those of you who are watching, those of you who are listening, you can take those questions yourself and answer those questions. And that's what self-care is all about, is to be able to ask ourselves some very intriguing questions, and, not get mad at yourself if you can't answer it, because sometimes, like you said, at any given moment, it can be a different answer, and sometimes you may not. And what I like to tell people, most of the time, if you ask yourself something three times, then it's like the more that you ask yourself that one question, whatever it is, then you will be able to answer it. Something will come up. And so be patient with yourself. But this is what living well is all about, because whether it's what unfolds in life or direct abuse, neglect, or abandonment, we all need to connect with ourselves and address ourselves. Because one thing that I have found within myself, and which has pretty much allowed me to propel into the self-care arena, was because I wasn't pouring in myself. I'm, kind of giving affirmations, working in the mental health field. Nothing's going on with me, but not realizing, just by not addressing ourselves, period, any unhealed, whatever that thing is, even if we don't think it's we've been abused or neglected or something, you know, in order to be well, we need to address ourselves. And so this is a great workbook. One, it has is a positive reading, and it's a great workbook to be able to have that self-awareness and to be able to do. That's where the action and the movement comes into piece. So I'm definitely grateful and thankful that you've been able to work through. I don't like using the word overcome so much. It's working through those things that have happened in your life, and you can still help others, reach out to others, and you have produced something that can is just so helpful, for people to really look at themselves, or to whatever word people want to use. Because sometimes I found when people say look at myself, oh, nothing wrong with me, you know what I mean? But in order to be healthy and well, we have to get in touch with ourselves. Because I always say there's parts of ourselves we just don't know, and we need to at least bring out the best of ourselves, and the only way to do that is to get a workbook like yours so that people can touch on. So how can people, first of all, before we end, is there anything else you like for the audience to know? One last message.
Yes, briefly. Number one, I love your haircut because we have the same sort of haircut.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Number two, if you're watching this video and you see behind me, these are all event posters from workshops and trauma recovery presentations I've done around the world. We have from Mexico, we have from El Salvador, we have from Chicago, we have from Greece, we have from Mexico, we have from Belgium, we have from Costa Rica, Bulgaria, we have from Croatia, and a whole lot more. So France. So I live in Mexico. I want to be hired to come back to the States from time to time to do what I'm good at. I'm actually competent at what I do, and I can back that up with 100 or so letters of recommendation. So hit me up about that. And thank you so much for having me. I see that you put the website on the screen. Let me just let everyone know that my website is under construction. In 8 minutes, I'm going to have a visit from Carlos and Miguel, who are going to come. We are signing a contract to build my new website interface. So I don't know when this interview is going to be up, but in a few weeks, it's going to be all so much better. So if you go to it now and you click on books or shop, just look for the books, and that's how you can get them. Or you can just go to the website where it says Sanity is a full-time job.org/collections/books, and you'll find all the books. And thank you, Sharon, for welcoming me into your community, for taking a chance on someone you don't know like me, and for allowing me to share my heart and share my wisdom and knowledge. And I send you like we say here in Mexico, an abrazo fuerte, a strong hug. And thank you for including me and for blessing me with this opportunity to heal, help myself, and hopefully have a positive impact on the lives of others. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you. I mean, it's been an honor of speaking with you, and I really have always been a firm believer that we need to hear all sides. We cannot ignore anything. Each person can, have their own discernment, but it's really important to hear everything, especially different things that can happen in the system. And so it's just really important for that. And if anything, of how people can work through and thrive. You're thriving in your own way, and you produce, some wonderful books where people can truly help themselves and find their own truth, in that as well. So I really appreciate your time as well.
I'm grateful. Thank you so much. That's all I can say is thank you so much. I hope everyone out there has a beautiful day, no matter where you are and no matter what's going on. Just remember that even in the worst of moments, you still have it within yourself to make it till tomorrow. So just give yourself a chance, and maybe when you wake up tomorrow, it's the first day of the best day of the rest of your life. Maybe that's possible if you let it be. I believe in that. Thank you.